In this video, we are addressing the topic of advanced health informatics, specifically the question of what innovations and advancements are being made in the field of brain imaging.
Currently, there are many technologies used in brain imaging. The most common types are MRIs, PETs, EEGs, and CT scans. There are many other types of brain imaging, as well as many different categories within each of these broader topics, such as fMRIs. MRIs use a magnetic field which realigns the hydrogen atoms in your body and radio waves which causes these atoms to produce signals. These signals are recorded by a computer and used to create an image of the brain. PETs use a radioactive tracer with a glucose compound to see how oxygen and glucose are used in different parts of the brain. It can also be used to identify certain signs that are associated with Alzheimer's disease. EEGs measure electrical impulses in the brain in response to certain stimuli or the absence of it, which can be used to detect seizures or the extent of brain damage. EEGs do not produce an actual image of the brain, but rather it produces graphs of the brain waves, which the doctors can then read. CT scans use an X-ray device with a computer to combine thousands of X-ray images of the brain into one picture. These types of brain imaging use different techniques to learn about different parts and functions of the brain. Something that a lot of them have in common is that they combine many different images to obtain one picture of the brain. This can cause the brain imaging process to take longer, which is one of the problems engineers and doctors are trying to fix today.
There are several other brain mapping techniques that are less common, such as magnetoencephalography, which uses magnetometers to record magnetic fields produced by naturally occurring electrical currents in the brain. It's used for research in certain brain processes as well as determining the functions of different parts of the brain. There is near-infrared spectroscopy, which measures changes in near-infrared light to allow for monitoring of blood flow and oxygenation in the frontal lobe, which is the front part of the brain. There are SPECT scans, which are similar to PET scans, but they measure the radiation directly, which results in lower resolution images, but it is a cheaper procedure. It stands for single photon emission computed tomography. It injects a gamma-emitting radioisotope into the bloodstream, which provides 3D information. And finally, there's EROS, which is event-related optical signal. It's relatively new. It's non-invasive. Uses infrared light through optical fibers to measure changes in scattering that occur with neural activity. The only constraint is that it can only go a few centimeters deep into the brain.
Now we're going to go through what brain imaging devices can and cannot do. So, brain imaging devices can do structural imaging, which diagnoses intracranial diseases such as brain injuries, internal bleeding, concussions, and even tumors. It can also act as a functional imaging device, which diagnoses intracranial metabolic diseases like Alzheimer's and schizophrenia. It can also be research object for neurological and cognitive psychology, as well as building brain-computer interfaces in the future. Also, fMRI could reveal active regions of the brain by tracking blood flow, which is commercially used for lie detection. Now, what brain imaging devices can't do is they're still low in resolution. So most devices have like a resolution of hundreds of thousands of neurons in a single voxel, which is relatively low for an imaging device. Also, it can still undergo technical problems such as small sample size errors and poor equipment calibration.
In the future, brain imaging will not just include improvements in image quality, but interactions with other machines as well. A professor at the University of Delaware has created a robot worn on the wrist that challenges the user in physical tasks. The fMRI is used to see how the brain changes in response to the challenges presented. The hope is to eventually be able to establish patterns in the brain's adaptations. Improvements in brain imaging include a new MRI technique called FLAIR. It fires the electrical pulses at additional angles that help to block out interference from fluids in the brain. This makes it easier to detect brain lesions, any abnormalities, and edemas.
There are many different methods of brain imaging that are integral to diagnosing brain injuries. Techniques like the MRI, CT, and EEG allow us to see the structure of the brain and what parts of the brain are active. But there are many ways for them to be improved, such as lowering the cost and time required to scan and raising the quality. Promising research like FLAIR is being done right now in order to improve and innovate in the field of brain imaging. So someday we will be able to use scans in order to understand abnormalities and patterns in the brain faster.